Hi everyone, my name is Arpit and I'll be talking about how you can go about building a product strategy for your company, whether it's a startup or a large company. So I'll be speaking about product strategy from my experiences as a product manager at Stack and also at WebEngage. I've recently joined ThoughtSpot. Actually, you know what, before I begin my presentation, let me just tell you in a little bit more detail about what I do and what I've done in the past. So I currently work as a principal product manager at ThoughtSpot. It's a fairly large company uh, compared to the previous gigs that I had. Before ThoughtSpot, I used to be the VP of products at WebEngage, and prior to WebEngage, I was a product manager at Stack, and I was the first product hire in the company. And my experience has primarily been only in SaaS. I don't have any B2C experience as such. So my learnings that I'll be sharing with you today are mostly from a SaaS perspective. They might be applicable to a B2C scenario, but yeah, I mean, I can't really say if they will be applicable because I haven't really worked in a B2C setting. And I post a lot on my blog about product management and growth. So you can check it out. It's a Medium blog publication that I have, so you can check it out after this call. And if you need to get in touch with me on email or on Twitter, those are my details. So there are a few things that I'll be speaking about today. One is I'll talk about what product strategy is to me, or my definition of product strategy. You might have your own definition of product strategy, but what I'll just start off with my introduction as to what I think product strategy is about. Once I've spoken about that, I'll then talk about how I have created a product strategy, and perhaps you could create a product strategy through the idea of product themes and different ideas that somebody might have about what you can do in the product. And of course, I'll be then speaking about how do you go about building a prioritized product roadmap, and then we'll just end with the summary of what I've covered today. All right then. So yeah, so the product strategy you can think about product strategy from two perspectives. One is your short-term perspective and the long-term perspective. So in the short term, product strategy to me is how your product will evolve this quarter, the next quarter, this year, and perhaps the next year. And if you look at it from a longer term perspective, you're largely talking about the vision of the product, and that could be like a 5-year, 10-year vision, and how you're working towards that vision. Now, obviously, long term is something that's good to have, but you should be taking steps in the short term that can help you get to that the long term vision that you have for the product. And the product strategy doesn't exist in isolation. It's tied very closely to the business objectives that the company has. So whatever the business objectives for that quarter or for that year are, your product strategy for that quarter and for that year will be tied very closely to those business objectives. So if your strategy this year is to just acquire large enterprises, then your product strategy should be suited or should be in tune with whatever this business objective that you have. So large enterprises have a certain set of features that they might want, or your large enterprise customers might want your product to behave in a certain way, which then means that your product strategy will be attuned to your business objective. And there are different ingredients that go into the making of a product strategy. So of course, you're thinking about the company's vision and what your product vision is. You're also thinking about where you are right now in terms of the vision that you have, and how you can sort of get to that vision. You're also, of course, thinking about what the needs of the customers are. Now, when I say customers, these could be prospects, people companies that you're speaking to, or companies that you have spoken to who ended up going with a competitor. And of course, it also needs to consider the needs of your existing customers. Your existing customers will have a lot of ideas, a lot of suggestions about how your product can evolve, and that should influence the product strategy in a fairly large way. The last thing that I want to talk about, and this is something that people don't tend to talk about, but in my experience, you should look at your competitors as well, whether they are direct competitors or indirect competitors, because your competitors also have a bunch of smart people that that are trying to solve a similar problem, and if they have done something or implemented a feature or considered a problem in a considered a critical business problem which perhaps you haven't thought of, then there's no harm in maybe taking inspiration from that. Or even if you don't take inspiration, it's just good to know where the competition is headed. So if you want to create a niche for yourself, then maybe that's something that you can do. So these are the different ingredients of product strategy. Now, this is theory. Let me just get into how do you apply all of this into creating, or what sort of concept should you be thinking of in order to create a product strategy. And what I'm going to share with you right now is how we went about creating a product roadmap at WebEngage. Our entire product strategy or a product roadmap was based around the concepts that I'm going to be sharing with you, starting this slide. So the product ideas can come from many different sources. I've talked about how your customers can contribute to giving you ideas about the product. You of course are thinking about ideas yourself. So that is you as a product manager, and also your colleagues. Now these could be people in the support team, could people in the sales team, people in the marketing team, or whoever it is. And of course the last bit, which is you're looking at what the competitors are doing. What you're really trying to get at is it's not so much product ideas, but it's more trying to identify the problems that you should solve. So your product ideas could be you could have many different ideas that you could have in terms of what you solve in the product. But it's critical to solve the right business problems, because if you're not, of course, solving the right business problems, then the ideas are not really worth anything. So the way we went about, so what happened at WebEngage was, now you see this table over here. You don't have to look at what exactly is mentioned in this table. Some of it is specific to WebEngage and BrowserStack, the ideas that I've listed here, but that's not really important. What we used to do at WebEngage was that we used to maintain a list of ideas in Google Sheets. You could be using Asana, Jira, or any of these software to maintain your product ideas. We use Google Sheets, and Google Sheets is a great way to just a simple sort of a software to maintain all your ideas. So whatever ideas we got from any of these sources, they just went into this shared Google Sheet that we had. It was only the product team that had edit access to this Google Sheet, but anyone else could just ping the product team, and then that idea will get added to this Google Sheet. So you'll have a bunch of product ideas, but then which ideas do you focus on? Which ones do you prioritize this quarter for this year, maybe in the next year? And how do you actually go about maintaining product leadership? If there are just 10 ideas that you have, then it's straightforward that you go and implement those 10 ideas. But okay, there's a question that has come here, which is, can Trello be used as well? So what I'll do is I'll just address all the questions after the session. But yeah, I mean, it's really up to you. Whatever software is good for you, you could just use that. Yeah, Trello is good as well. Some teams in ThoughtSpot use Trello. So yeah. Anyway, so you have a bunch of product ideas. If it's just 5 or 6 ideas, then it's just straightforward. You can just go and implement those 5 ideas. But what ends up happening is that this list of ideas just keeps increasing. So at WebEngage, we had at one point in time around 400, 500 ideas of what we could do in the product, spread across many different areas, which then begs the question as to which ideas should you be focused on. How do you go about prioritizing this list of 400, 500 items that you have? You're talking about business goals for this quarter, for the next quarter, this year, and the next year. So, what is it that you should be working on today? What you should be working on perhaps the next quarter and the next year. All right, so now I'm going to go into the step-by-step process that we used at WebEngage to really build a product strategy and build a product roadmap. So the first thing that we did was that each of the ideas that we had, we just categorize each of these ideas into one of these 4 categories. It could either be a game changer, it could just be a table stakes functionality, or it could be a small optimization that you've made or that you want to make to an existing feature, or you could just ignore a request that is come in. So what we would do is each of these ideas that we had, we would just categorize them into these 4 categories. Now, what I mean by game changer is that this feature is so good, it's something that your competitors don't have, that if you were to launch this feature, then there's there's a huge impact that you would have in terms of your existing customers wanting to perhaps upgrade their subscription in order to make use of this feature, or a lot of new prospects, or a lot of your prospects that you're speaking with, or a lot of people who've heard of you, but a lot of people who hear about this feature will now be interested to speak to you because this is such a game-changing feature for that industry and for the product that you're working on. So that's the first category. The second category is table stakes, which are also new features that you're launching, but these features are perhaps something that the competition already has. So maybe you're playing catch up, or is this something that the competition doesn't have? It's good to have these features, but they're not as impactful as your game-changing features. So we're calling them table stakes. The third is optimization, which are small optimizations that you're making to the existing features that you have. It could be a UX optimization, could be a sort of a technical optimization. And the fourth category is ignore, which basically means that you've got this idea from someone. It's a great idea, but it doesn't exactly fall into the ambit of your product. And that's something that you will never consider, whether it's today, whether it's next year or 5 years. I don't know about 5 years, but it's not something that at least you would consider today or perhaps the next year. And you would mark that as ignore, so that you can filter that idea and go in your Google Sheets. So that you're looking only at ideas which are in the game changer category, the table stakes category, or the optimization category. And then your job becomes which game changing features do I work on, which table stakes features do I work on, and which features do I work on which are in the optimization category. And the process that we followed in the past is that we've worked, at least at WebEngage, we've worked on a mix of these features in every quarter. So if there are, let's say, 30 ideas or 30 features that you're working on, maybe 1 or 2 of those would be game changers, maybe 8 or 9 would be table stake features, and the rest of them would just be optimizations that you're making to your already existing features. So that's the process that we followed. It could happen that you realize that there's a lot of tech debt that you've built up over the years, and you don't want to focus on any new features in this quarter, as a result of which you would then just focus on features which are in the optimization category. So it's really up to you, up to your business in terms of what ideas do you want to focus on. So you had the list of ideas that I had shown you. So these are the product ideas that I had, and I've just added a category over here. So if now just consider the earlier problem that I had, that we've got 400, 500 ideas. We've neatly categorized them into these 4 categories. But you still realize that there are maybe 200, 300 of these ideas that you want to focus on, which again is it's a hard problem to solve. Which of those 200 ideas or 300 ideas should you focus on? So now, before I get to this list of ideas, I want to introduce this concept of product themes. And themes basically means a set of product ideas that belong together. So if you have a set of ideas which are in the onboarding category or in the onboarding theme, you want to build a great onboarding experience for your customers because you're working on a self-service SaaS software. And for this onboarding theme, you have a bunch of ideas. So your first idea, second idea, maybe there are 50 ideas that you have for your onboarding. And all of that can be categorized into this theme that we're talking about. You might have 5 ideas which fit into your second theme, which is make the product faster. So like this, there could be 10 themes that you have, 20 themes that you have, or that number is really up to you. At WebEngage, we used to have maybe 10 or 12 themes at any point in time. And then we would decide which themes do we want to focus on this quarter and the next quarter. And I'll come to all that in the following slides. But themes, again, they could be anything. It's really up to you what you define a theme as. It's just that a set of product ideas, you should be able to categorize them into themes. It shouldn't be the case that you have one product idea or you just have one product idea which maps to one theme. That it doesn't really it's not really helpful, because the idea of theme is to have a set of product ideas that belong together. And the idea behind themes is that whenever somebody reads a theme that you have, they should be easily be able to understand what is the problem that is being solved. So your idea could be, we want to move our technology from Adobe Flash to WebRTC, but if it's something that the customer is reading, does it make sense to them? Not really. You would want to move your tech from Flash to our WebRTC because you want to make your product faster. And if your theme is make your product faster, then that's something that the customers can understand. That's something that everyone inside in your team can understand, whether it's a product team, whether it's a support team, or whichever team. So it's important to build themes which solve the problem for your customers and that are easily understood by everyone. Or at least that's the definition that we've used in the past. Now, your themes should tie very closely into the business objectives that you have. So if you remember in the first couple of slides when I was talking about business objectives for that quarter and for that year, you might have certain objectives that you have. Let's say there are 3 objectives that you're working on this quarter. This would then mean that to take care of these objectives, you work on these product ideas or themes that product ideas which fall into these themes. And what I mean by that is if your business objective for this year is to increase conversions, or let's say it's the business objective is to increase conversions, of your self-service customers, then that would mean that one of the product themes that you could be working on is to build a great onboarding experience. And your onboarding experience is tied closely to your business objective, and of course your business objective will have some metric that is that you can measure whether you achieve the objective or not. So in this case, for this onboarding experience, is we could be measuring something like maybe your conversions have increased. The larger message that I'm trying to bring across here is that your business objectives will have some business metric, and your themes are tied to a business objective, as a result of which your theme will have some business metric that it's impacting at the end of the day. And just like you have your annual goals, quarterly goals, the same way you'll have annual themes and quarterly themes that you're working on. So in this case, there are 6 themes over here. You might realize that this quarter, this is the only theme that you want to focus on, or in this quarter, maybe these are for the first 4 themes are the themes that you want to focus on. It's really up to you. So the next step that you're going to do is that we had all these ideas that we were talking about. We had categorized them as table stakes, optimization, game changes, and things that you have to ignore. So what we're going to do in this step is that we have a bunch of product ideas that we've neatly categorized into one of these 4 categories of table stakes, ignore, optimization, game changes. What we're going to do now is that we're going to attach a theme to each of these product ideas. So the themes that you saw here, these will now be, you'll tag each of your ideas with a particular theme. So that said, I'll just summarize what I've spoken about so far, which is you have different business objectives for that quarter, for that year. Your themes are tied to your business objectives. So you will have 2 or 3 themes, or maybe 4 or 5 themes that you want to focus on in that quarter based on your business objective. Each theme has a bunch of product ideas that are attached to it. So if you decide to focus on 3 themes, there could be, let's say, a list of 100 product ideas that you could be focused on in that quarter. And out of these 100 ideas, it's important to work on a mix of different, it's important to work on product ideas across different categories, such as game changes, table stakes, and optimization. If you just work on game changes, then your existing customers, I don't know, maybe they have a lot of complaints about your existing features, as a result of which they won't be too happy that you're ignoring all the existing features and just working on game-changing features. So it's important that you work on a mix of all of these. Now, the problem that we have to deal with is that there are 3 themes that we've decided to focus on this quarter. There are 100 ideas in that theme, in those 3 themes. Now, which ideas do we focus on today? Which ideas do we focus on a month down the line? So there must be some way in which you should be able to sort your list of product ideas in a descending order, so that you know exactly which ideas to tackle today and which ideas to tackle maybe next month or the month after. Now, there are 3 parameters that we've used at WebEngage, at least in terms of in terms of deciding which ideas do you tackle first. The two parameters out of three are what you see on your screen here. The three parameters that we have are urgency, impact, and effort. I'll talk about urgency in the next few slides. But if you just look at it from an impact and effort perspective, then as a business, you want to focus on your lowest hanging fruits, which is ideas that have high impact but involve low effort. It just means that if it's something that you can do within a day or within a few hours, and if it's going to have a high impact, then it makes sense to focus on that first, instead of something which is going to have a high impact and that requires a lot of effort. So if something's going to take a month to do, a couple of months to do, then that's perhaps maybe you should be tackling it a couple of days or 3 days or maybe the next week or whatever, rather than today. And something which is going to have low impact and involves a lot of effort, those are not ideas that you should perhaps consider. So, and the ideas in the other category, which is high impact, high effort, low impact, low effort, it's really up to you when you want to focus on them. But the overarching message that I'm trying to bring across here is that your high impact, low effort items is what you should be focused on, today, and then maybe your high impact, high effort items first. Now, the third parameter that I wanted to speak about here was urgency. Now, an idea could have a lot of impact. So it could be highly impactful. It could have 10 ideas could have a lot of impact, and all 10 would require the same amount of effort just a day to do. Should you do everything today or should you do everything tomorrow? So to answer that would be a parameter that we've introduced is called urgency, which in some ways tells you that this is something that needs to be done today. It's going to be high impact. It's going to involve low effort, but it'll be awesome to just do this feature first before we tackle the rest of the items. Let me take a different sort of, let me express it in a different manner. So instead of taking this very simplistic scenario of considering only the high impact, low effort items, let's just look at items which are across all these categories. There are items that there are product ideas that you could implement today. There are product ideas that you could implement a month later. Or there are even product ideas which fall into this theme, but the idea is not that urgent. I mean, it's going to have great impact. It's going to involve some level of effort, but it's not something that customers really need today, because you could have 10 ideas and some of them could be just very urgent because it's something that the customers are demanding, and some ideas can have a lot of impact, but it's okay to do them maybe a month down the line or perhaps even the next quarter, because they're just not that urgent, even though they have the same impact. So what we used to do at WebEngage was that we would rate each of these ideas on urgency, impact, and effort, and we would, for each of these parameters, we would rate them on a score of 1 to 5. So something which is most urgent, most urgent being 5, least urgent being 1, and similarly for impact, for the impact and effort parameters. So something which is going to involve a lot of effort, that would be 5, and least effort would be 1. And I'll tell you how this sort of all falls together really well. So anyway, so these are the ideas that we had. We had categorized them. We had added a theme to them. What we're doing now is that on these 3 parameters, which is urgency, impact, and effort, we're just scoring them on a scale of 1 to 5. So we feel that this first idea, which is implement advanced analytics feature to track product engagement, that is very, very urgent. So let's give this an urgency of 5. It's going to have some impact, but it's not going to be an impact of that you could score as 5. It's just you feel that it could be maybe a 4. And in terms of effort, it's again a 4. And similarly, you do it for the rest of the product ideas that you have. Again, ignore is something that it should probably be filtered so that it doesn't even appear here, because that's not an idea that you're going to be considering. Now, one thing that you have to note here is that maybe some of your game-changing ideas, of course, they will have an impact of, let's say, a 5 or so. But your optimizations also, some optimizations could have a big impact because it solves a teething problem that a lot of customers have. And some optimizations could be sort of a good to have. Maybe it's just the customers won't even feel the impact, but you want to do it because it's maybe the right thing to do, or maybe from a UX perspective, it falls into how or your other pages look. So maybe that's why you want to do it, which would mean that the impact maybe a 2 or a 3, and it's very urgent for you because maybe it's something that the customers have been complaining about, or it's something that you've been wanting to fix for the longest time. So that urgency, you could assign that urgency as high rather than low. Now, all of these scores that we're talking about over here, all of this is just qualitative impact. The way these are just qualitative. I mean, the way we used to derive these scores was based on qualitative discussions that we would have internally among product engineering and the management. So the two co-founders of WebEngage, the VP of engineering and sometimes the engineering leads, along with the product team, would get involved in doing all of this analysis. The product folks would take some sort of a crack at putting a category and a theme, but all of these scores we would do it jointly, maybe a few times a quarter. So for effort, this used to come from engineering. Impact was sort of like a joint effort among all the teams. Urgently, I mean, sort of a joint input from all the folks that were involved in the discussion. So the reason we did this is that there must be some mathematical way to say that that out of these 100 features, this is the order in which I'm going. I'm going to tackle idea 10 first, and then idea number 15, and then idea 88, and so on and so forth. So we figured out that there are 3 or 4 themes, and in this theme, this is the order in which we're going. In this theme, this is the order in which we're going. So the reason we assigned a score for all of these 3 parameters is that we wanted to score each of these ideas. The formula that we used was that the total score is equal to 100 times urgency plus 5 times impact minus 1 time effort. What this is giving us is a score for each of these ideas, and if I just sort this in a descending order as far as the total score is concerned, then I would know which ideas do I have to focus on today and which ideas do I have to focus on tomorrow. Again, going back to that graph that we had, that we want to focus on the high impact items first, and then the high impact, low effort items first, and then some of the other items. So what this formula is basically telling us is that when you look at 5 times impact minus 1 time effort, it just means that focus on the most impactful items first, which require the least effort. So in this case, you see that there is this which requires an effort of 4, and there is this which requires an effort of 3. This means that this requires more effort and this requires lesser effort, which is why we're doing minus 1 time effort. If you just think about it later after this session, this formula would sort of make sense. So again, I'm just reiterating it, even though I've discussed this before. Focus on the most urgent, most impactful, least effort items first before you get to the other things. So we've got all our 100 ideas over here. We've given them a score of whatever on all these 3 parameters, and we've calculated the total score for each of these ideas. And in the next step, I will just sort them in descending order to know that which ideas do I have to focus on today, which ideas do I have to focus on perhaps the next month, and so on and so forth. So in this case, we had this list which wasn't sorted, and now there is this list which is sorted, which is telling me that focus on this idea first, and then this idea, and so on and so forth. So this is my last slide, and I just wanted to summarize, and we'll get to the Q&A after this. I just wanted to summarize what I've discussed today. So you should always, when it comes to a product strategy or product roadmap, it should ideally start with the business objectives that you have for that quarter or for that year, and that then should flow into the themes that you've picked for that quarter or that year. A theme has many product ideas attached to it. If you're focused on these, maybe 3 different business objectives this quarter, then this could mean that there are 3 themes that you're focused on, or maybe there are 5 themes that you're focused on that quarter. And in those 3 themes or 5 themes, there are these 100 ideas which are categorized into these 3 themes or 5 themes. So you're focused on these 100 ideas, and the order in which you should tackle these 100 ideas is based on the formula that I just spoke about, which considers those 3 parameters of urgency, impact, and effort. And one thing that I wanted to iterate again was that you might do all your calculation and you might see that it's all your enhancements that, or these optimizations, this formula tells you that you should just focus on optimizations in that quarter and not the game-changing features or your table stake features. That is I mean, at that point in time, you should then get into a qualitative discussion whether you've done your scoring in the right manner and if this is what you should be doing. At WebEngage, at least, we used to focus on a mix of these things. So it could be 2 or 3 game-changing features, a few optimization, and a few table stake features. And so those were the slides that I had prepared. I will stop sharing.
Hi, Arpit. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Arpit. I think that was one of the most succinct presentations on product strategy that I've seen. Very to the point, very concise. Really liked it. And thankfully, you gave a formula. Um, People are asking, immediately started asking questions about how do you measure effort, how do you measure impact, how do you do this, how do you do that.
Yeah.
But thankfully, you
Yeah.
gave a formula as well.
Yes.
Um,
One thing that I want to state is that different companies go about solving this product roadmap or product prioritization in different ways. So there are a bunch of different models that you'll see out there, Kano model and whatever the different names are. I had taken a look at those and I realized that it's a bit complicated. It's not something that if I'm speaking to, let's say, a customer success person, it's very easy for them to understand this particular formula that we're using and why we've reached,
Correct,
rather than something going using a formula which has something in the numerator and something in the denominator. You're using something, you're dividing something by
correct,
something, and
correct,
it's not just easy to understand. So this is something that
correct,
works for
correct.
us, but yeah, different companies solve it in different manner.
Correct, correct. So in my experience, what I've seen is that if you're doing a very high level prioritization, then Kano model and other fancy things sometimes are helpful.
Yeah,
You're planning for 6 months, you're planning for 1 year, you just want to
yeah,
get a very high level understanding. But on
yeah,
a day-to-day basis, you need to get down to this simple table where you just
yeah,
plugging numbers, getting a score, and deciding, okay, this is the one which
yeah,
sees the light of the day, and the others are killed pretty
yeah,
much right there.
yeah,
Awesome. Thank you so much, Arpit. There are a whole bunch of questions. I jumped in. I thought I'd quickly help you out.
yeah, sure.
And I addressed some of these questions, but some of these questions are not yet addressed.
Okay.
And some of these I would like you to also answer. For example, one question was, um, how frequently do you prioritize?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do a big exercise. We used to do a fairly large exercise, and just before the start of the quarter. So that would be like a maybe 1 day, 2 day exercise where you're running through this entire sort of a roadmap. I mean, whatever your business objectives are for that quarter, and whatever 100 or 200 ideas that you have. Then you're doing the urgency, impact, and effort sort of analysis. But we would visit this. You're definitely doing it once a quarter. At WebEngage, we ended up maybe discussing this 4 or 5 times a quarter, because not everything is set in stone. It could be the case that if you're a startup, priorities change. So this quarter you wanted to focus on these 3 themes, but suddenly you want to focus on this theme because that has a lot more. You realize that that's something that just needs to be prioritized over other things. So which then means that you take everything else out that belong to a particular theme and insert this new theme. So I would say maybe 4 or 5 times a quarter, with a largest exercise being done at before the quarter starts. So what we used to do at WebEngage as well as Hotspot is that there would be a hard commit that we would do for the upcoming quarter. So if it's the end of December and you need to communicate to your customers what you're going to do in the Jan to March period, then that would be a hard commit that, with 99, maybe 90%, 95% confidence, I can tell you that these are the 100 things that are going to come in the product. And of course, if priorities change, then that's a different thing. So we would do a hard commit for the upcoming quarter and a soft commit for the quarter after that. That we are thinking of these things, but we can't tell you as of today that these are the things that we're going to focus on in that. If you're looking at December, then Jan to March is hard commit, and April to May June. So April to June would be like a soft commit, and that soft commit will become a hard commit at the end of March.
Very interesting. I have one follow-up remark and follow-up question to that.
Yeah,
The remark is, personally, a lot of people have asked me as well. Like a lot of startups have also asked me how frequently should we prioritize, etc.,
yeah,
etc. So I typically tell them that you should be prioritizing at least a quarter's goal at least once.
yeah,
At least once you should have something on your dashboard, something
yeah,
that okay, this is what we're going to focus on,
yeah,
and you should have at least one exercise every month or twice
yeah,
maximum.
yeah, absolutely.
Anything more, then basically you're not, then it's noise, then you're not giving yourself time to settle down and focus on doing the most important things and
Yeah,
committing to that. Otherwise you're
yeah,
like everything is on the fly and it doesn't matter, and
yeah,
today we are building login methods and tomorrow we are figuring out checkout methods.
yeah.
That will not make sense.
Yeah, it's not something that you do end up doing every other week. Once a month is
Exactly.
definitely good
Right,
enough.
once a month is ideal, twice a month if you're very young and too many things are shifting. But
Yeah,
beyond that is noise. You should
yeah,
avoid that.
absolutely.
And follow-up question to that is, when you say a soft commit and hard commit, essentially in the such a competitive world,
Yeah,
isn't that a risky thing to like kind of let your next 6 months out roadmap out to your customers? Because let's say a competitor might also pick up, okay, this is what they're planning
yeah,
to build. Why don't we, run fast and do it better than them?
yeah. I mean, I
How do
don't
you
think
handle that?
so. I mean, it's okay that I'm sure the competitors would get it from somebody or the other, and that's okay because I think most people are working on their own sort of product roadmap. If somebody is copying you, then good for you. That they'll always end up playing catch up. But one thing I've seen is that customers want that product roadmap, or even forget about the customers. I think internally within the org, people want to know what's actually happening going to happen in the product this quarter, especially some of the customer, for people who work in some of the customer facing roles, such as your sales team, your success teams. They want to know what's coming in the product so that they commit to the customers accordingly. So at ThoughtSpot, we in fact share with them. We know what we're going to do this year, so that is shared with the customers, and then we do that hard commit, soft commit, that hey, we're committing what we're going to do next quarter, and so that the customer also knows, and that's something that they appreciate. And I've also seen that, I mean, customers don't really hold you to it. They understand that you might end up doing everything, or even if you're doing 90% of the things, and you couldn't do 10% of the things, then that's okay. But as long as that visibility is there, there's a lot of confidence that you build with the customers, because I don't think companies just customers buy a product just because of the state that it is in. They also buy your product based on the roadmap that you have. They want to know what else are you thinking of.
I
So
agree. The
yeah,
feature roadmap is an important thing. I agree.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's a question by Ashish. He's asking, how do you manage product roadmap, especially when you're working with enterprises? Because enterprises might have urgent requests which can completely
yeah,
derail your roadmap, right?
yeah,
So, and you want to crack that deal, for
yeah,
example.
yeah,
So, how do
absolutely.
you handle it? What do you do?
Yeah, in fact, this problem becomes even more intense when you're a small startup and you've got 10 customers who are paying you a lot of money, and there's one out of those 10 is demanding that you work on a particular
Right.
skill, which is of a lot of importance to them. I mean, I mean, I don't have an answer which I don't have like an objective answer. It's just very subjective at the end of the day. Web Engage, when let's say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, if set of customers were asking us to do something urgently, then maybe would have ended up doing that. But now, if somebody is demanding something which needs to be done today, at least at WebEngage, we had reached a stage where, I mean, we could tell the customer that this is not something that we can do today. It's something that we'll probably address maybe next quarter, or it's not on the roadmap, on the immediate roadmap. If it's a blocker in the sense that there's something that you had launched, or it's just something that is affecting a lot of your customers and that needs to be done and that derails your product roadmap, then by all means, just trash whatever I've spoken about and just work on that feature. I mean, if it's something which affects things in the production, then of course that needs to be fixed. And if you realize that I'm in this quarter, a month down the line, a lot of the customers are asking for it, then by all means, just introduce this and don't focus on some of the other things. But it's very important to understand, or to, if you're a mature company, or if your product has been around for a while, just because 5 customers are asking for it, it doesn't mean that you need to prioritize it. There should be some sort of pushback that the product team is doing with the customer success team, with the sales team, and the success and the sales team would then sort of need to push back or set the expectations of the customers. Just need to set the right expectations with the customers as well. And at WebEngage, the team was able to handle it really well. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of push that I had from at least the success and the sales team that, hey, let's just do this. They understood the rationale, and that happened over time. So anyway, long-winded
Got it.
answer to a good to a good question.
Got it. So basically, if you are young and you do not have a lot of bargaining power with your enterprises, then figure out whose money you don't want to lose, and just figure out how not to lose it.
Yeah,
Uh,
practically that's what you would end up doing if you're slightly mature, if you're doing a few $1 million in revenues, and some
you
customers,
can
set of customers are asking you to do it. It doesn't make sense as far as roadmap is concerned. Just push back.
correct. Then you can push back and tell them that why you can't do it right now, and you would like to do it in maybe 2 months, 3 months time, sometime.
Yeah, or even in the
Uh,
future. Yeah,
yeah, or maybe you will not do it at all
yeah,
because
no,
it doesn't align
yeah,
at all.
totally. Yeah.
Okay, so there's another question by Solai. Solai, your question is not too clear. Can you just explain it? So he has, I think, this written, does this take place before getting into backlog or for the current sprint? I guess he means when does this prioritization happen? So I think we have already answered that question, Solai, that the prioritization typically happens once or maximum twice a month, and it is not exactly linked or dependent on the sprint or the backlog. Essentially, you have a large backlog. Yes, you prioritize it once or twice a month, but you'll not typically block the sprint for that. Ideally, you should do it much before the sprint. Arpit, if you want to add to that, you can please.
Absolutely. No, no, nothing
Right.
to add to
Okay.
that.
Got it.
What was the
So
question?
Abhishek has a question that can we also do bottom up, as in we have an idea, we come up with an idea, then we link it to the theme, and then we link it to the business objective instead of top down.
I don't know. I haven't done it in that manner. Maybe that makes sense for like a very small startup. Generally, what you're working on in the product needs to be closely aligned with your business objectives. Because if your business objectives say this and you want to work on some other things, then that your business objectives will not be met.
Right.
So yeah, what will practically happen is that you have a bunch of ideas that you have, and then you need to go through this exercise where you attach a theme. And it's something that you're doing on sort of as a product person, you're doing it on an everyday basis. That you're adding ideas, you're adding a theme to it. The whole prioritization, of course, you're doing it maybe once a quarter. But this exercise, yeah, you're probably doing it on a daily basis, adding different ideas to it and adding it and all of that.
Understood. Santosh or Satosh has a question. So, how do you evaluate your strategy? You made a strategy, great. You prioritize it, great. But how do you evaluate your strategy? If it's a metric, how do you know if it's an implementation requirement issue or it's a flaw in the strategy itself?
I think it's just going to be a qualitative analysis. I don't have any good answers to that. If there are some leading indicators that you have that it's not working, then that's good. Otherwise, if it's a lagging sort of an indicator where you've launched something and it doesn't work, then that's that. Um, that's what we've done, at least. That what we have been sort of good at least in the past at WebEngage or even at ThoughtSpot, is just focusing on the right kind of problems to solve. And if you focus on the right kind of problems to solve, then yeah, you'll achieve some sort of success. Whether that's, whether that hits your target or not, that's a separate thing. And
Correct.
yeah, just put
Correct.
it have faith in it.
Exactly. So I think, see, strategy in general connects the how, what, and why of things, right? So ultimately, whatever you implement. Who asked this question? Satosh. Yes. So Satosh, ultimately, how, what, and why, right? So whatever you implemented and however you implemented, ultimately it should answer the why. And you had some numbers at the very beginning. So if that number is not being hit, then you will try to figure out what went wrong in your strategy. Was it logical flaw in your entire measuring or reading of the market, or you didn't understand the customer really well, or you didn't you preempted the entire the feature request too much, or you over engineered it. Maybe it was not needed. For example, you could have simply sent an SMS. You didn't require a full blown chat solution, for example, which derailed your rest of the roadmap, for example, right? So you start figuring those things out a little later. Then you will start, the next time you do it, you will test your every single large, anything that takes longer than a week, you will test it out beforehand before you actually put it in the shipping, because you do not want to be on the wrong side of your developers. You don't want them to work on something for 1 week and then throwing it out because users are not using it.
Yeah. So one company in India that does this really well is Browser Stack. So if
Yeah,
the early stages of Browser Stack, the you know when we went to the founders to speak about ideas, he didn't want to discuss any ideas. He just wanted to focus on the business problem that we're solving. And the reason for that was that we just wanted to validate. He wanted to validate that this is the right problem to solve. And if the problem
absolutely.
is valid, then there could be 10 ways in which you could go about the problem. So we spent a lot of time in doing this validation and figuring out which problems should you focus on, rather than this
Absolutely.
idea is cool, so let's do that.
Absolutely. Okay, quick question, which is how did you get to this 100, 5, and -1 number? 100 for urgent, 5 for what was it? Important, and 1 for effort, -1 for effort. How did
Yeah,
you arrive at
it's
that
just
weightage?
it's if you remember the graph that I showed you, you want to focus on the most urgent, most impactful, least effort items first, and the formula is just basically telling you that. So that that 10 and 5 is just, these are just, you could very well be using 100 and 99 and 98. 110 and 5 is just easy to digest. All this is telling you is, focus on the most urgent, most impactful, least effort items first before you get to the
Yeah, but if somebody has to create his own formula for that, for his own startup,
yeah.
like how did you iterate, or it was like, okay, one fine day you woke up and you're like, okay, 100, 5, and -1. That's it.
No, I'm saying 100, 100 and 110 and 1. It doesn't really matter what numbers you use here. It's just that in our case, urgency was the most important parameter for us, and impact was the second most important parameter, and then it was effort. So since we were looking at it from that perspective, and again, this is going back to that low hanging fruits, most impactful, least effort items, which is why this formula came about. You could very well change it
Understood.
to 3 times urgency plus 2 times impact minus 1 time effort, and you'll reach a similar sort of conclusion. 110 and 5 is just easy to calculate.
Got it. And it kind of also disproportionately aligns you towards urgency. If there's something is
Yeah,
urgent, then obviously
yeah,
that'll get a lot of weightage.
yeah, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Another question from Abhas, which is I would like to know about product messaging in this product strategy map, like how to go for product messaging. Is it important to associate it with product ideas, theme, or business objectives? And broadly, how do you look at product messaging also? Do you even consider it
So this is in terms of
at early
product.
stages? Somewhat product marketing only. So essentially, if you, for example, if you're setting up your roadmap very early and you want to give a
Yeah,
hard commit to your
yeah,
customers, you would
yeah.
want to figure out how to present this to your customers as early as possible. So sometimes you would brand certain features. Sometimes you would, explain the benefit in a certain way. So do you include that part of your roadmap? You don't do it. How, when do you do it?
So what we do at ThoughtSpot is that the product marketing knows what we're working on, or even at WebEngage, the product marketing used to know what we're working on, and any collateral that they had to create, or even the in-product messaging in terms of getting users to just not adopt, but just getting the word out there in terms of there are these things that we've launched. We used to communicate with the product marketing before we started working on the feature, so that in parallel they could then do whatever messaging that they have. And then in terms of reaching out to the users or communicating this to the users, it was a mix of things that we did. Again, we're talking about a SaaS software, so there's a lot of outreach that the product team did with the customers, and that could be in the form of monthly sort of a newsletter that you're sending, which has all the product updates, and or it could be in the form of whenever you launched a new feature, there's like a pop-up that shows up that, hey, there's this feature that's launched, just try it out, read this blog post or read this release note to understand what it's about. Yeah,
Understood.
that was product messaging for us. So product marketing as well as the internal sort of messaging in terms of reaching out to the customers to inform them. about that feature.
Got it. Uh, how do you use this prioritization system in multiple product scenario? If you have a basically if you have a product line, if you have a bunch of products,
Yeah,
uh, you know, now the smaller product might not get that kind of, let's say, food
yeah.
to to for developer time, for example, to run. So how would you prioritize it? How what would you suggest?
If you have different, I mean, if in a product you have, if you have, completely different sort of product lines, so like an Atlassian has Jira and, or let's say Freshdesk, they
Right.
have CRM software, support software. So in that case, of course, each team would have their own sort of priorities that they're working on. But if your question is more related to there is one product that I have, and in this product you have maybe three different lines or main features under which all of the product ideas lie, and which should you prioritize today and what you should prioritize maybe the next year. It really depends. I mean, depends on what you're working on. If that small product or that small set of let's say the small product that you're working on, if it's I mean, my question would be, you're calling it a small product, and then why even work on something like that? If it's not going to make a difference to the customers, then why even work on that? Maybe just work on the bigger products. Or if the question is more
Correct.
related to, there are these existing products that I have, and there's this new product that I'm launching. In terms of impact, a lot of customers are already using the existing product, so that means that I focus only on the existing product, because obviously this will not have as much impact because it doesn't have as many customers, and that's a qualitative call that you have to take, that this impact will be high because as a result of working on this new product, it'll just open like a new market, which would mean that the impact is actually going to be high, which then means that the way you're measuring the impact, which is just with the existing customers, is not the right way to go about it. You should be thinking about impact holistically.
Correct. So I think the only addition that I will make is consider the product life cycle of these different products. So the mature product is already mature. You're handling it in a very different way. You're prioritizing very different way. Whereas a smaller product, perhaps you're just testing the market. You're just validating the market in the first place. You're at the very early stage. You're trying to figure out if you have enough early adopters, if you have enough early users and all. And if that is there, then you will figure out the rest of the things,
Yeah,
right? So accordingly, you will start investing enough time and money on that product because you want to ensure that this product is validated, is true, and it is worth investing time in.
yeah.
Gaurav has something very interesting. Gaurav asks that let's say if uh, you have an option. I mean, you did your prioritization exercise. You got two interesting features. One would help you in increasing the product portfolio.
Hmm.
Let's say adding a new feature, for example, which
Yeah,
has some positive impact. Or second is clearing the technical debt,
yeah,
and both of them got the same priority. Let's say same score.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Now, which
it's
would
a
you prefer?
yeah, it's a qualitative call at the end of the day. I mean, whatever I've said, the formulas can only help you so much. At the end of the day, you're just taking a qualitative call that these are the 100 things that I have, but the formula is telling me that all these 100 things are important. But five of these I just don't want to consider for some reason. So just exclude those five, and there is this thing that I really want to consider, and I see that. The impact that it's going to have is not all that much. It's going to take a lot of effort. Then does this mean I should consider it or not? It's just a qualitative call that you're taking. If you see that there's a lot of technical debt that has been added, and I mean, at the end of the day, the technical debt idea and some other idea, if they have the same sort of the same sort of score, then I mean, it's just a qualitative call. Just decide to go ahead with the technical debt because that's you just want to go ahead with that and not with the other one. Yeah, so you're solving both the things in that quarter, but you just decide to go with this than that. And there's no hard and
Very
fast
interesting.
rule. I mean, the formula is just giving you some sort of a guiding light in terms of this is the direction in which you have to go. You
Correct.
feel free to
Correct.
just start and
Exactly. So correct. I think this is something which I've also personally faced whenever I introduce some framework, some formula. People
yeah,
latch onto that framework and formula like that. This is your silver bullet. Honestly, there's no silver bullet.
yeah,
There's never a silver bullet. So these formulas, these frameworks, whether Kano model, whether this framework or any other framework, they will just give you a certain amount of direction.
yeah,
But beyond that, you will have to apply your qualitative lens and figure out what is the right thing to build
Yeah.
if everything else kind of falls in the same place.
Yeah.
Okay, there are a whole bunch of questions. I'll rush through them. And so one is, two of them actually very similar. One is, how do the strategies differ when you are building your MVP, when you do not have a lot of things tested?
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, very similarly, that if you're moving from, let's say, on-premise product to, let's say, a SaaS offering,
Yeah.
right? So essentially, how do these framework or these formulas, for example, the strategies, for example, differ when it's
Yeah.
MVP or on-premise? I believe a lot of these things are similar, but yeah, please go ahead.
So MVP, if you're working on, if you don't have a product, if you're just building something, then just trash whatever I've spoken about and just do what you have to do. This framework and all that wouldn't really make sense when you're in the MVP stage. All of what I've spoken about is you have an existing product that has some level of success, and then you have this problem of what should I focus on next. Customers are asking for this, whereas maybe I want to focus on that. So what is it that you should focus on? So yeah, it's a fairly simple answer for that. And for the next question, which is you have an on-premise software and you want to convert that into a SaaS product. Is that the question?
Yes. So how would things change? So functionalities are same, but the delivery is different.
Yeah.
So how would you, apply the same fund days to this scenario?
I don't really know. So at ThoughtSpot, we have this problem right now. We have it's an on-premise software, and we do our delivery once a quarter, which is very different from SaaS. That where you have multiple releases a day, or you're just releasing it on a regular basis. ThoughtSpot is trying to get into the SaaS model as well, and I don't really have an answer. I mean, all I can say is that your on-premise and your SaaS they should probably just go hand in hand. Where your SaaS the customers are seeing it on a daily basis, whereas with your on-premise software, since it's deployed at the client premises, you're probably deploying it maybe once a quarter, once a month. But I mean, they go sort of going in tandem. I mean, it's the same sort of software that you're developing. I don't know if I've addressed the question, but it's yeah. I mean,
So just to add to what you have said, Arpit, actually the difference between on-premise and SaaS is just that SaaS will have a lot of the amount of flexibility that you have in developing and deploying is much more in SaaS, because you have full control, so you can deploy it anytime, anything, and you can move around things a little bit. But in on-premise, you have certain window in which you can actually deploy things most of the time. Um which kind of leads to your prioritization has to be a little more precise. Your roadmap has to be a little more precise, because on-premise people are ultimately going to pay a little more as well compared to a SaaS setup, right? So you'll have to be a little more. Uh, your error tolerance is much lower when it comes to on-premise, and you have to be precise. You can't be going back to their data
yeah,
data
that's.
centers and setting things up, right?
I think you've put it well. Yeah.
Right. That is no difference that I see at least.
Yeah.
Um there are a few more questions, two, three more. One is, should rescoring be done in backlog as situations sometimes change and hence the score may also change? So yeah, you can do that. I think, Arpit, right? So you can easily change that score. Score
Mm.
is a score end of the day, right? So you can change the score as you deem fit. If you think the scores are giving you bullshit results, please jump and change the scores. Uh, right? Let's say you have built a very strong team now. When you launched the entire method of scoring, you had a younger and inexperienced team, so they used to give very high effort numbers, for example. In that case, and now you have very strong team now, so maybe the effort numbers have decreased. So the score is completely skewed now. So you can change the weightages, and you get a little more
Yeah.
accurate
But you
number.
might just you might think something is very impactful this quarter, and then you don't do it this quarter. A few competitors end up doing it, which would mean that maybe it's not going to be as impactful the next quarter, which means that you'll reduce your score for that feature come the next quarter.
Correct.
Yeah.
How does the strategy differ in B2C product compared to B2B? So I worked on a bunch of hardcore B2C companies, and it's very similar. So you do prioritization, you do your quarterly, monthly, sprint level prioritizations. At the same time, you have to be very, very responsive towards the market and towards the data that your product is throwing up. If your product is throwing up data where your customers suddenly are dropping off, your entire strategy, your entire strategy goes for toss, and you'll figure out how to just stop that drop off that you are suddenly seeing, right? And so that is very common in B2C. You have to be extremely responsive, very flexible, etc. But you still have an overarching theme. You're not absolutely cowboy and you're building whatever you feel like. You have a certain overarching theme and overarching numbers to drive, but still on a week on week, on a day-to-day basis, you think a little more flexible.
Yeah.
Okay, I will end with the classic question which people ask,
Yeah.
which is, are there any standard frameworks to create a product strategy?
Well, this is the I just covered a standard framework to create, not a standard framework. I covered my framework to create a product strategy. You'll come across many
Right.
models. We went with this because it was simple. It's something that everyone could understand, and I've looked at a different bunch of different models, and this is something that worked for us. It was yeah, it was just simple to do and just very intuitive. But if you think that there's some other product framework that you can use, which makes sense for you, then yeah, just by all means go ahead.
Correct. So, like, so honestly, this question of standard framework has been asked. I've taken so many sessions and then has been asked to me every single time, irrespective of whatever I'm talking about. Uh, a general, a general guidance, a general thought that I would like all of you to inculcate is there's no standard frameworks whatsoever when it comes to product. There are a whole bunch of different methods of doing things. Now we can pick whatever is working for you and for your company and for yourself. Think of defining that framework itself as a as an iterative exercise where you start with maybe first 2 weeks you start with one framework. You see if that is working well for you. If it's working, great. If not, then change it to something else and tell. But very important that you tell everyone that hey, we are in the process of defining the framework. Okay. Otherwise, people will start thinking that okay, this guy has no idea what he's doing, and they will stop taking this seriously. But if you tell them, inform them that hey, I'm in the process of defining the framework that will help us in the years to come, then they will be a little more supportive,
Hmm.
right? But pick something very simple because it's much more important to onboard the users. It's exactly the same way as building a new product, right? It's very important to onboard everybody and buy into that framework in the first day. Otherwise, if you are the only one who is talking about, hey, I have a framework, hey, I have a framework, and nobody's even looking at that,
Yeah.
right? So you have to get those early adopters in, maybe 3 or 5, 4 people. Then once these 3, 4 people have started producing results, maybe ask your CEO that, hey, can you drop in an email asking everybody to start using this framework for reporting, let's say, the requirements. People don't report requirements, for example. Your sales team is not going to report requirements. They will simply email you, simply WhatsApp you, simply call you that, hey, my customer is asking me this, can you build this out for me? And then like, I can't do it. I can't work like that, right? So you will need to onboard everybody on the same framework, on the same method of working. And then once that method of working has started working for you, then you add another feature, then you add another feature, then you add another feature, and so on, so forth. Ultimately, you get to a point where everybody is comfortable. They also get certain amount of confidence that whatever I ask, Arpit is delivering. Whatever I ask, Arvind is delivering, and my requests are being heard. Right. That is how perhaps you can. At least this is how I have built out things in the past, of ensuring that everybody's on board and everybody's working together towards the same framework, towards the same method of working.
Thank you so much for yeah getting me on this or inviting me for this session. Yeah, if you have any questions, just guys, please reach out to me
Awesome.
on email, Twitter, whatever, and just check out my Medium blog. I've talked about this exact same topic in a long blog post, which got I mean, a bunch of people really liked it. So yeah, if you have any doubts, just look at that blog post. It has whatever I've spoken about, it's covered in that blog post.
Awesome, Arpit. Thank you so much. So, folks, Arpit is a little elusive when it comes to taking sessions, but we are so grateful, so thankful that he is here. I personally admire him a lot because WebEngage, coming from India, coming from I know the journey of WebEngage right from the day one. In fact, day zero, or even day minus 10. right? So I know the journey that our WebEngage has gone through and how difficult of a product that is to actually build it out and especially scale out of India, right? And command the kind of premium as well as command the kind of respect that they have been able to generate across the world, right? Gartner, G2, for example, constantly put them in very good rankings, which is incredible to come out of India, right? So personally, I admire Avlesh, admire Arpit for their work incredibly a lot. Uh, Very good work done, and they have prioritized so much of things really well. They prioritize functionality sometimes, they prioritize UI sometimes, etc. etc. A lot of good work that they have done. So please do follow, read up what Arpit is mentioning and Arpit is talking about. Thank you so much, Arpit. Overall,
Thanks, Alvinder. Thanks, Piyush.
yeah.